now for the news in detail. Pakistan has urged the international community to hold India accountable for its state terrorism in occupied Kashmir. Speaking at a virtual meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said discrimination against any community on the basis of race and religion should be condemned. He also welcomed the U.S.-Taliban peace deal and said Afghan stakeholders must seize this opportunity for peace in the country. Separately, Indian troops have killed another youth in Kashmir, raising the death toll from violence by occupation forces to 20 in the last 3 weeks. Occupied Kashmir has been under New Delhi's lockdown since August last year. Well, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom seeks sanctions on Indian government agencies and officials over religious violence.
The Commission has recommended Washington to freeze the assets of those guilty and bar their entry into the United States. The body says religious freedom in India took a drastic turn downward last year. The body said India should be listed under countries of particular concern for severe religious freedom violations. It said mob lynching and Babri mosque verdict have created a culture of impunity for campaigns of harassment against religious minorities. It said India stripped occupied Kashmir's autonomy, terminated all human rights, cut communication and arrested leaders. The USCIRF pointed out mosques in the valley are closed, Muslim leaders are threatened by extremist groups. The body also condemned scapegoating of Muslims during the COVID-19 crisis in the country. It said US Congress should continue to hold hearings highlighting the deplorable religious freedom conditions in India.
Well, Pakistan has recorded over 2,200 new cases, its highest in a single day, taking its total coronavirus infections to over 34,000. The health ministry said 31 patients died since yesterday, as the death toll has risen to 737 across the country. The ministry said over 8,800 people have recovered from the deadly virus. It said that more than 317,000 tests have been conducted across the country, with nearly 12,000 just in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the government has extended the suspension of domestic flights till May 29th. The suspension of domestic flights was earlier extended to May 7th and then further till May 13th. Well, in Spain, 184 more people have died from the new coronavirus in the past 24 hours, taking the country's death toll to over 27,000. Meanwhile, the number of infections in Russia has surged past 242,000, with over 10,000 new cases in a day. Earlier, the United States recorded 1,900 fatalities in a day, pushing the country's overall total to more than 82,000. The global death count has exceeded 292,000, with nearly 4.3 million infections. More on that now in this report.
As governments in some countries start easing lockdown restrictions, COVID-19 cases in other countries see a spike. While the U.S. continues to be the virus epicenter, Russia now has the second highest toll with over 232,000 cases. Infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci has warned U.S. Congress against lifting lockdowns as it could lead to an additional break of COVID-19.
Because I feel if that occurs, there is a real risk that you will trigger an outbreak that you may not be able to control, which in fact, paradoxically will set you back, not only leading to some suffering and death that could be avoided, but could even set you back on the road to trying to get economic recovery.
In Germany, the scientific body advising the government on coronavirus says the virus reproduction rate has been above 1 for 3 straight days. While the world pushes on for a vaccine as soon as possible, the World Health Organization says they have a tricky task at hand.
So indeed, the work to develop the vaccine is moving faster than in the history of science. And we have over 100 candidate vaccines, and the ways in which it's being tested are being accelerated. But coronaviruses are very tricky viruses.
The authorities say the pandemic could trigger an influx of refugees in Europe if COVID-19 situation worsens in the Middle East and North Africa.
Well, the Taliban say they are fully prepared to counter Kabul's forces in all fronts. This comes after President Ashraf Ghani ordered the military to switch from defensive to offensive mode against the Taliban. In a statement, the group said the Kabul administration would be responsible for the escalation in violence and its ramifications for Afghanistan. Condemning recent attacks, the group said such ambushes are jointly planned and executed by ISIS and the Kabul administration. The group said since the signing of the Doha deal, Ghani has been trying to create hurdles in the peace process. It said clashes in some areas were a result of Kabul forces trying to take new areas or constructing new checkposts. Russia has criticized the U.S. claim of being a part of the Iran nuclear deal as ridiculous. Moscow's UN envoy Vasily Nebenzia said, having quit the agreement in 2018, Washington has no right to trigger UN sanctions on Tehran. Speaking to media virtually, Nebenzia said the U.S. should rethink the move, as it will halt the International Atomic Energy Agency inspections of Tehran's nuclear program. Asked if Russia would veto such a move in the Security Council, Nebenzia said Moscow does not see any reason to impose an arms embargo on Iran. Earlier last month, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hinted at using the JCPOA to restore the UNSC arms embargo on Iran, which is set to expire in October. The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has urged the EU to use its economic influence to halt Israel's annexation of the West Bank. In a phone call with the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, Shtayyeh discussed the threats posed by the Israeli violation of signed deals and UN resolutions. Shtayyeh said Israel's upcoming unity government is a coalition made just for the purpose of annexation. Shtayyeh called on Europe to adopt the Palestinian proposal for holding an international peace conference. Josep Borrell said a meeting of the European Union's foreign ministers is scheduled for Friday. He said Israel's annexation plans will not go unnoticed by the EU. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has hailed Israel as a partner in the campaign against coronavirus and Iran's regional actions. Pompeo's visit comes as the U.S. signals its support for Israel's plan to annex 30% of the occupied West Bank. In a joint statement with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Pompeo voiced hope for progress in Washington's plan for peace with Palestinians. Netanyahu said Israel appreciates the U.S.'s strong position against Iran. Earlier in an interview, Pompeo said he wanted to update Netanyahu and Gantz face-to-face on President Donald Trump's vision for peace. The U.S. plan gives Israel full military control over Palestinians, much of their land, and all of Jerusalem. Meanwhile, Gantz has resigned as parliament speaker ahead of the inauguration of the unity government. Israeli forces, meanwhile, have shot dead a Palestinian youth in Fawad refugee camp south of the West Bank. In a statement, the Palestinian Health Ministry said 4 others were wounded during the raid near the city of Hebron. The incident happened hours before the arrival of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Israel. In a statement, the Israeli military said soldiers fired live bullets to disperse Palestinians during an arrest operation. The camp's people staged demonstrations against Israel in the vicinity. Tensions in the region are high since Israel has announced it will annex major parts of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. Yemen's government has ordered the army to expel separatist Southern Transitional Council forces from Aden and neighboring provinces. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the decision came after the council refused to revoke its self-rule declaration. The ministry said the army will halt its offensive on Aden if the STC immediately implements the Riyadh agreement signed last year. It said the army's responsibility is to defend the country against armed rebellion and to restore the government's authority. The statement said the STC must be prepared for consequences over the refusal to come back to the Riyadh Pact. Yesterday, the army said it seized control of a separatist military camp on the outskirts of Zinjibar town in Abyan province. Libya has called on the UN to take action against Khalifa Haftar's forces that targeted the Turkish and Italian foreign missions in Tripoli. In a letter to the Security Council, Foreign Minister Mohammed Taha Siala said the airstrikes violated the Vienna Convention. Siala said the UN should take action in line with its historical responsibility to promote peace and stability in the region. Last week, Haftar forces carried out rocket attacks on Mitiga Airport and Tripoli Harbor, which hit near settlements of the Turkish and Italian foreign missions. Meanwhile, Turkey has accused the UAE of bringing chaos to the Middle East through its interventions in Libya and Yemen. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said the UAE, along with Egypt and other countries, is trying to destabilize the whole region. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Germany and Estonia have submitted a new UN resolution to the Security Council on a global ceasefire during the COVID-19 pandemic. The new resolution will replace the one drafted by France and Tunisia that was blocked by the United States. The draft resolution now encompasses 5 major points compared to the previous draft's 9. Estonia organized a teleconference during which the new resolution was proposed behind closed doors. Estonia's ambassador to the UN, Sven Jurgensen, said the Security Council must find a way to end the deadlock. Earlier, Washington threatened to use its veto if there were any explicit references to the World Health Organization. U.S. President Donald Trump has accused the WHO of downplaying the seriousness of the virus outbreak that began in China. Authorities in Costa Rica have seized over 1,200 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside a vessel carrying pineapple juice. The police said the shipment, worth $29 million, was destined for the city of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The Coast Guard intercepted the fishing vessel labeled Amanda M upon suspicion. The country's public security minister, Michael Soto, said anti-narcotics officers were reviewing cargo when they came across the hull.
Anti-narcotics police carried out this inspection and analysis of all the ships, vessels and containers that leave to highly important destinations. And based on that profile, they went to the second stage, which is scanning. And that is how this significant quantity was discovered. I repeat, this is the 3rd case we have had this year.
Brazil is on the brink of becoming the epicenter of COVID-19 in South America, as a record 881 people died from the disease in one day. The number of infections in the country has also surpassed that of Germany, with over 178,000 confirmed cases so far. Even with over 12,000 deaths from the virus, President Jair Bolsonaro argues the economic damage from closing businesses is worse than the disease. Earlier, Bolsonaro, in a decree, exempted gyms and hair salons from lockdowns. At least 10 state governors said they would not follow his decree. U.S. Senate Republicans have rejected an over $3 trillion coronavirus relief package proposed by Democrats in the House of Representatives. Republicans say they want to hold off the new bill to assess the impact of nearly $3 trillion worth of measures already allocated. The new measure includes funding for states, businesses, family support, and public testing. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi defended the bill, emphasizing the social and economic challenges that coronavirus has foisted on the U.S. The House is due to meet on Friday for an expected vote. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said it would be impossible to get the proposed package passed in the Senate.
In terms of the House Phase 4 bill, it's got so much unrelated to coronavirus. It is dead on arrival here in terms of a viable idea. The amount of money and the way you spend the money and the unrelated provisions in the bill make it impossible for it to get out of the Senate.
In India, a survey by Azim Premji University has revealed 67% of workers have lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 curfew. Millions of workers were forced to go back home without food after Delhi announced a nationwide lockdown in March. The survey showed in urban areas, 8 out of 10 workers have lost their jobs, while the average in rural areas is 6 out of every 10 workers. It said 76% of salaried workers and 81% of casual workers have lost their jobs across the country. The study said 49% of households reported they did not have enough money to buy even a week's worth of essential items. The government has announced a $266 billion support package to help mitigate the fiscal damage caused by the pandemic. The coronavirus infections in the country have crossed 70,000, with nearly 2,500 deaths. Around the world, COVID-19 has affected fights against other diseases in different ways. In Latin America, the novel coronavirus has pulled crucial attention and resources away from the battle against dengue. Doctors and medical experts have warned increasing dengue patients can fill intensive care units of hospitals. The details in this report.
In Latin America, the dengue epidemic, which started in late 2018, is still being felt. The Pan American Health Organization expects 2020 to be marked by high rates of dengue.
COVID is the star right now, so all of the attention is on the COVID. But there are still problems with dengue, classic dengue, dengue hemorrhagic, malaria, Chagas, and in the peripheral areas, there is a problem of hospital capacity.
Paraguay has reported nearly 43,000 confirmed dengue cases with 64 deaths. In Ecuador, Health Ministry said dengue cases have jumped up to 888. The Bolivian authorities fear dengue cases may explode this year. Around the world, COVID-19 has affected patients of other diseases as people are avoiding visiting hospitals.
We have increasing cases of dengue until COVID-19 appears, and suddenly dengue disappears. Then dengue decreases. But why it is decreasing? Dengue does not decrease because the infection decreased, but it decreased because those people with fever did not go to the hospitals. Surely they no longer met the clinical requirement to be diagnosed with the dengue.
Although dengue is not usually fatal, but if the infection is severe, it needs to be treated with intravenous fluids. The patients who do not get tested are at risk of dangerous complications. The experts say dengue patients cannot be treated if they stay at home due to spread of coronavirus.
The first thing I thought was I want to stay home before I expose myself. I'm not going to the hospital. My friends recommended that I go to the hospital, but no way. I prefer to treat symptoms at home and in case it is serious to go to the hospital.
Dengue has also spiked sharply in Central America. Cases in Costa Rica nearly tripled in May compared to within a year ago, to over 2,000.
Prime Minister Imran Khan has said Pakistan's trade has benefited from the EU's GSP Plus agreement. In a statement, the Prime Minister said the country is intending to honor its commitments under the 27 international conventions. He added that the country would also fulfill its pledges to 6 human rights conventions, which are a part of the GSP Plus agreement. The Prime Minister said the country is committed to furthering human rights commitments. European stock markets have slumped as concerns of a second wave of COVID-19 weigh on investor sentiment. CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 2% lower. Frankfurt's DAX has lost over 1.5% as Germany's second largest lender, Commerzbank stocks, fell over 3.5%. In London, the FTSE 100 has lost nearly 1%. Meanwhile, in Asia, Seoul's Kospi closed nearly 1% higher, followed by the Nikkei 225, which lost about 0.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index lost a fraction, while the Shanghai Composite gained after shedding early losses. Well, the UK has extended its job retention scheme to pay the wages of workers on leave till October. The scheme pays 80% of the wages of 7.5 million workers who have been temporarily laid off. During a parliamentary session, the Finance Minister Rishi Sunak said there will be no changes to the scheme until the end of July. Sunak said from August to October, the scheme will continue with greater flexibility to support the transition back to work. He said the government will ask employers to start sharing the cost of paying people's salaries.
Workers will, through the combined efforts of government and employers, continue to receive the same level of overall support as they do now, at 80% of their current salary, up to £2,500 a month.
Oil prices have gained ground after OPEC's de facto leader, Saudi Arabia, announced it will increase supply curbs in June. The announcement followed other OPEC members' decision to extend deep output cuts reached in April for a longer period than originally agreed upon. U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate crude futures settled at nearly $26 a barrel, while international benchmark Brent crude futures settled at about $30 a barrel. The U.S. Energy Information Administration said it expects worldwide demand for oil to drop by over 8 million barrels per day to nearly 93 million barrels. It also cut its expectations for U.S. supply in 2020 to drop over 5 million barrels per day. In April, OPEC and its allies decided to cut output by nearly 10 million barrels per day for May and June in response to 30% worldwide drop in fuel demand. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. For the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news. Thanks for watching.